Why should we be in such desperate haste to succeed and in such desperate enterprises?
The Eminent Domain Report, premiering Tuesday, January 22nd, powered by S6K Investigates and WBAI Radio.
Eminent Domain is a tool used by the government with land developers to take property from landowners, many with no debt and most who did not want to sell.
We're battling our depression.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
What's criminal?
We're going deep into the process and effects of eminent domain from the perspective of the people staring it in the face. Catch us on the radio during the wake-up call, Tuesday mornings or all day, every day online at s6k.com/eminent. It's time to stand up. Who owns your property?
All I know is that first, you've got to get mad!
Wow. Eminent Domain. 8:15 in the morning, you're listening to BAI 99.5 FM, and that cart gave us the heads up that this morning we begin a collaboration with s6k.com. Now, they're an independent archive of original and shared journalism, media, documentation, and research on culture, politics, and human rights. So we're going to begin with a discussion of eminent domain over Wake Up Call, and you can follow up on the website, which is www.s6k.com. In our earlier 7 o'clock hour, when we were in conversation with Caroline Fredrickson, the U.S. Capitol switchboard again, that's 202-225-3121, and that's for all of us to register our support for this competing bill that they're trying to put forward that goes against the government bill, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which, according to Caroline, is really an erosion, a continued erosion of our human rights, continued as in since the invasion into Iraq, the Bush administration has overseen bill after bill that has been about eroding our human rights. So we're about to have a conversation about the eminent domain. This is a collaboration with s6k.com, an independent archive of original and shared journalism, media, documentation, research on culture, politics, and human rights. You can follow up the discussion on the website www.s6k.com. And joining us is Daryl Hell of S6K Investigates. Good morning, Daryl.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. So, first of all, just explain to us exactly what eminent domain is.
Well, eminent domain is basically where the government can take your property, and whether you owe money on it or not, they can actually take your property and then decide what they're going to do with it. Now, there was a new case that had come together that in New London where there was a ruling that allowed eminent domain, which used to be only used for, quote, a blighted situation, that now it can be used to enhance a revenue base of any area.
Okay, so what have been the kind of recent Supreme Court decisions that changed the principle of eminent domain?
Well, that was the New London case. It ended up ruling where they could use it specifically for the tax base, not just to improve an area that was either underdeveloped or had areas that had been left to their own devices.
Okay, and we see, I guess we see the possibilities for the use of eminent domain in the efforts by Columbia University and the developers to take over Harlem. So just explain how this is implemented across the region and I guess across the country.
Well, that's what we have Reverend Kevin Brown, he's actually going through that right now in Long Branch, New Jersey. I think we're supposed to have him on the air as well.
Okay, well, let's cross over to him. Good morning to you, Reverend Brown, Reverend Kevin Brown.
That's correct. Good morning. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. So just explain to us this story about eminent domain in Long Branch, New Jersey.
Well, so Long Branch, New Jersey has pretty much been the focal point of the entire state where eminent domain has been used excessively. 1996, 2 years after the state legislation, the city council here have started to pass a number of ordinances and resolutions wherein they can declare areas in need of redevelopment. The standards to which they start to apply to personally owned property were completely different than what one would have expected. Obviously, if you needed to build a school or a hospital, one would know that the government could come in and say, this is something we need to do for the community at large, and we must take your land. In this plan out here, they said, well, we're going to take your land, and we're going to build high-rise luxury condominiums. We're going to build malls. We're going to build eating places. And we're going to do this with private developers. There was a period of time in 96 where when they were introducing the plan that the private citizens could have rallied and objected, but they didn't tell us to the extent they were going to begin to use eminent domain, because they showed us plans that indicated our current properties that were in good order would remain as they renovated the properties surrounding us that obviously needed renovation. It wasn't until about 8 or 9 years after the introduction of the plans did they then go ahead and start noticing perfectly good properties that we had to take your property. It's really been a mess down here.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like one. And so at that point, are you able to object in any real practical way, or because there's been the original agreement that nothing you say now stands?
Well, since the taking of the McLeod property on the oceanfront, which sort of alerted everybody, Mr. McLeod had a beautiful Victorian home about 300 feet from the ocean. The sad thing with the McLeod property is in the process, the city hires an appraiser. He appraised the property with an unfriendly property owner. McLeod would not let the appraiser into his house. McLeod did not believe in America you could force someone off their land. He was not cooperative. As a result of his lack of cooperation, his appraisal suffered. They say, well, this guy's property is worth $140,000. They go to court on an order to show cause, deposit the $140,000 with the judge, who then clears title and hands the property over to the city.
Really?
You can get up there if you like to and say, I object, and the judge will look at you, and in 9 out of 10 cases out here, the judge says, well, where were you in 1996? You stand there and you say, Your Honor, I'm here now. Now you're taking my property. It's 2002 as relational to the McLeod case. And the judge says, well, you should have been up and screaming in 1996.
But can you not quite fairly articulate the fact that you were clearly misled about the extent to which the properties were going to be affected? So if you can't know what you didn't know at that time, you can only know what you know now.
You're 100% correct. And a reasonable mind would then figure, open an ear and listen to you. However, it becomes a matter of credibility. You have people in office who have been in office back in 1996 who remain in office out here saying, oh, that's not what we said. And in the language, the way they wrote these ordinances, if you didn't follow through and read every innuendo and every little what we could do if this doesn't work, you are not aware.
So the devil was in the detail.
There you go. There you go.
Wow. So then just explain to us the kind of struggle that's being waged against all of this.
Well, shortly after the McLeod seizure in 2002, a group of homeowners immediately north of the McLeod property, which is called by the city Beachfront North 2, formed a coalition called Matocha. Matocha represents 3 blocks, Marine Terrace, Ocean Terrace, and Seaview Avenue, hence Matocha. They hired attorneys, started to engage the Institute for Justice out of Washington, D.C., a public interest law firm, beginning to concentrate on the abuse of eminent domain across America. And they were given a little heads-up training on how to attempt to combat it. which really is engaging the community, engaging government, protesting, rallying. If it wasn't for the citizens in the Metoxa area of Long Branch, I don't believe we would have gotten any attention what was going on around us here, because none of us could have afforded to place ads and buy signs, and because it centers on folks who otherwise couldn't defend themselves, even if they had the wherewithal and the legal process to use. How do you afford to use it if you don't have the money to pay for it?
God, that's
Metoxa has been really the spearhead of our objections. They haven't been able to so easily take those homes, but the city is poised to take them, as the state appellate division is now awaiting a date in state appeals court. Hopefully that the city won't be able to take them, but it looks grim. It looks grim.
God, this is an aggressive but sophisticated battle that's being waged against you guys down there.
And it's not a new one. If people would stop to think, it's happened many times in our history in this country, and government knows this. For instance, the two that I have really looked at, Wounded Knee, for instance, when they took the Lakota Nation's lands, it took close to 100 years for our Supreme Court of the United States to finally rule what the United States government did to the Lakota Nation was wrong, and that damages need to be paid the people of the Lakota Nation. More recently in history, a town called Poletown in Michigan, the entire town was wiped out by eminent domain to give the land over to General Motors to build a plant. The plant never got built. It took over 20-some-odd years for the United States Supreme Court to rule those seizures were wrong, and those people need to be compensated. Unfortunately, no one could find any of the residents of Poletown when that decision was finally rendered. Government, fully aware of this, can abuse you if the political atmosphere is in their favor to do so, and the powers to be in the local courts are in agreement with the goal. They'll run you down, and it could take anywhere from 20 to 100 years for justice to actually be served.
Reverend Kevin Brown and Daryl Hell from S6K Investigates, thank you so much for shedding light on eminent domain. I had never heard about it. I realized that I'd known about it, but I'd never heard it described in those two words. And for those of you who want to continue the conversation, you can follow up on the website www.s6k.com, and they're going to be bringing us more reports. But for now, Reverend Brown and Daryl Hell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.